Elvis Presley received thousands of letters every week. Fans wrote to him from every corner of the world. Some asked for autographs, some asked for money. Some simply wanted to tell him how much his music meant to them. His fan mail was so large that Graceland had a dedicated team just to sort through it. But in the middle of all that correspondence, one letter stood apart from the rest. It came from a little girl. She was young, no older than 8 or 9, and she had lost her father. Her dad had been a devoted Elvis fan his entire life. He grew up listening to Elvis on the radio, bought every record he could find, and passed that love of music down to his daughter. For this family, Elvis was not just an entertainer. He was a part of their daily life, a voice that filled their home, a name that came up at the dinner table. When her father passed away, the girl did something that most people would never think to do. She sat down and wrote a letter to Elvis Presley. She asked him if he would come and sing at her daddy's funeral. The letter was not written by a publicist or an adult trying to pull strings. It was written in the simple, honest words of a child who was grieving and who believed, with complete sincerity, that Elvis might actually say yes. She explained who her father was. She told Elvis how much he had loved his music. She described what it was like growing up in a home where Elvis songs were always playing. And then she made her request, plainly and without any sense of expectation. She was not demanding anything. She was simply asking, the way a child asks, with full honesty and nothing held back. What made the letter stand out was exactly that quality. There was no strategy behind it, no clever wording designed to get attention. It was just a girl who missed her father and wanted to do something meaningful at his funeral. She believed that hearing Elvis sing one last time in honor of her dad would be the most fitting tribute she could give him. People close to Elvis have said over the years that he had a particular soft spot for letters like this. He received plenty of mail from famous people, from industry figures, from those who wanted something from him professionally. But letters from ordinary people, especially those going through hardship, affected him differently. He read them personally when he could. He sometimes responded in ways that surprised even those who worked closely with him. The girl's family had no connection to the music industry. They were not wealthy. They had no way of getting to Elvis through any back channel or personal contact. All they had was a letter and a hope that it would somehow reach him and that he would take it seriously. There was no reason, on paper, for Elvis to respond. He was one of the most famous people on the planet at that time. His schedule was managed down to the hour. He had concerts, recordings, film commitments, and personal obligations that filled every week. The idea that he would clear time to attend the funeral of a man he had never met at the request of a child he did not know was not something anyone would have predicted. But the letter reached him, and Elvis read it. Those who were around him at the time said he was quiet after reading it. He did not make a big announcement, he did not call a press conference or tell his management team to look into how this could benefit his image. He simply thought about it, and then he made a decision. He was going to respond, not with a form letter, not with a signed photograph sent through the mail. He was going to do something that the little girl had not fully allowed herself to believe was possible. He was going to show up. What happened next was something that the people in that small community would talk about for the rest of their lives. When Elvis Presley decided to respond to that little girl's letter, he did not hand the matter off to someone else. He did not ask a manager to send a polite rejection with a signed photo tucked inside. He did not have his team draft a standard reply thanking the family for their loyalty and wishing them well. He made a personal decision, and he acted on it himself. He said yes. For the people around him, this was not entirely surprising. Those who worked closely with Elvis knew that he had a side to him that the public rarely saw. Behind the concerts and the cameras and the constant attention, there was a man who took other people's pain seriously. He had grown up poor in Tupelo, Mississippi. He knew what it meant to have very little, to lose someone close, to lean on music as a source of comfort when life became hard. That background never left him, no matter how famous he became. People on his personal staff have spoken about this over the years. They describe the man who would quietly send money to strangers going through difficult times, who would visit sick fans in hospitals without telling anyone, who would go out of his way to acknowledge people who had written to him with genuine need. These were not things he did for publicity. In most cases, he specifically asked that they not be made public. He simply did them because he felt it was the right thing to do. This situation was no different. When he read the little girl's letter and understood what she was asking, something in it moved him. Here was a child who had lost her father. Here was a family that had no power, no influence, no way of reaching him through any normal channel. They had nothing to offer him in return. And yet she had written to him with complete sincerity, trusting that he might care enough to respond. He did care, and he responded in the most direct way possible. He said he would come. The logistics of making this happen were not simple. Elvis at that time was one of the most recognized people in the world. Arranging for him to attend a private funeral without turning it into a media event required careful planning. He was not interested in showing up with cameras and reporters following him. This was not meant to be a public moment. It was meant to be a private act of kindness for a grieving family. His team worked quietly to make the arrangements. They contacted the family, confirmed the details of the service, and made sure that the visit would be handled with discretion. Elvis made clear that he did not want the press involved. He was not doing this to be seen. He was doing it because a little girl had asked him to, and he had decided that was reason enough. He also rearranged his schedule to make it work. This was not a small thing. His days were planned well in advance, and shifting commitments required coordination across multiple people and obligations. But he made it happen. Whatever had been scheduled for that time was moved or adjusted. The funeral came first. There is something worth pausing on here. Elvis could have written a kind letter. He could have sent flowers and a personal note expressing his condolences. Any of those gestures would have been more than most people would expect from someone of his stature. The family would have been grateful. The little girl would have treasured a letter from Elvis for the rest of her life. But he chose to go further. He chose to be there in person, to sing, to stand in that room with a grieving family and give them something that no letter or photograph could ever replace. The family was told he was coming. It is not difficult to imagine what that moment felt like for them. In the middle of their grief, in the middle of the hardest days they had faced, they received word that Elvis Presley was going to walk through the door and sing for their father. He kept his word. He showed up. The day of the funeral arrived. The family had been through the quiet, exhausting process that follows losing someone close. There were arrangements to make, relatives to contact, and the constant weight of grief that settles over everything when a loved one is gone. But underneath all of that, there was something else in the air that morning, something the family could barely believe was actually going to happen. Elvis Presley was coming. He did not arrive with a motorcade or a crowd of handlers. He did not come in the way that a celebrity might when they want to make an entrance. He came quietly. Those who were there described his arrival as calm and understated. He walked in without drawing unnecessary attention to himself, greeted the family personally, and took a moment to speak with the little girl who had written to him. That moment alone, before a single note was sung, meant everything to her. She had written a letter not entirely sure anyone would even read it, and here was the man himself, standing in front of her, treating her with complete seriousness and respect. He did not rush past her or give her a quick handshake on the way to the front of the room. He stopped. He talked to her. He acknowledged her loss and her father in a way that was personal and genuine. The people gathered for the service were ordinary members of the community. Friends of the family, neighbors, co-workers of the man who had passed, fellow churchgoers. Most of them had no idea when they walked through the door that morning that Elvis Presley would be standing at the front of that room. When the realization spread through the gathering, the reaction was not one of excitement or noise. It was something quieter than that. People were still and they were moved. Word had not been spread widely in advance. Elvis had been specific about that. This was not meant to be a spectacle. It was a funeral service for a man whose family deserved to grieve with dignity. The presence of Elvis was meant to honor that man, not to overshadow the reason everyone was gathered. When the moment came for him to sing, the room went completely still. Elvis stood up and sang. He chose songs that fit the moment, hymns and gospel pieces that he had grown up with and recorded throughout his career. Music had always been connected to faith for Elvis. He grew up in the church, and gospel music was something he returned to throughout his life, not as a performance style, but as something he genuinely felt. In that room on that day, it showed. He was not performing, he was singing. There is a difference, and everyone in that room could feel it. There were no stage lights, no microphone setup designed for an arena, no audience expecting a show. There was just a man standing in a small room singing for a family that was hurting, doing the one thing he had been asked to do. People wept, not because Elvis was famous, but because of what the moment represented. A father was being laid to rest. His daughter had made one wish and it had been granted. And the music filling that room was the kind that reaches something deep and honest in people, the kind that does not need any explanation. Those who attended the service later said it was unlike anything they had ever experienced at a funeral. The combination of grief and gratitude and the sheer unexpectedness of what was happening created something that stayed with people long after the day was over. When Elvis finished, he did not linger for photographs or conversation beyond what was appropriate. He paid his respects to the family, said goodbye to the little girl, and left the same way he had arrived, quietly, and without making it about himself. Outside, news had begun to spread through the surrounding area. People who had heard that Elvis was there had gathered. By some accounts, the crowd that formed outside numbered in the thousands. They had come because of what they had heard, and what they had heard had moved them just as much as being inside had moved everyone else. Stories like this one do not stay hidden forever. Word spreads, first through the people who were there, then through their families, then through communities, and eventually through the wider world. The people who attended that funeral carried the memory of that day with them for the rest of their lives. They told their children about it. They brought it up in conversations when Elvis came on the radio or when his name appeared in the news. It was the kind of experience that does not fade because it touched something real. Over time, accounts of what happened that day made their way into the broader record of Elvis Presley's life. Biographers, journalists, and people who had worked closely with him began collecting these kinds of stories, and there were more of them than most people realized. The funeral was not an isolated incident. It was one example among many of Elvis doing something quietly generous for someone who had no way of repaying him and no connection to his world. What makes this particular story stand out is how clearly it reflects who Elvis actually was when the public version of him was set aside. The image of Elvis that most people carry is shaped by the performances, the photographs, the cultural impact of his music. That image is real, but it is only part of the picture. The man who showed up at that funeral was not the performer. He was someone else entirely. He was a person who had read a child's letter, felt something, and decided to act on it without calculating what he might gain in return. People who knew Elvis personally have consistently described this quality in him. He was someone who felt other people's pain directly. He did not process grief or hardship from a distance the way that fame often teaches people to do. When something affected him, it affected him fully. The little girl's letter reached him because it was honest, and Elvis responded to honesty in a way that went beyond what most people in his position would have considered necessary. He grew up understanding loss. His twin brother Jesse was stillborn, and Elvis carried that absence with him his entire life. His family had very little money when he was young, and they relied on their faith and their community to get through difficult periods. The church was central to his upbringing, and gospel music was the first music he truly loved. All of that history lived inside him, and it shaped the way he saw people who were suffering. When he walked into that funeral and sang, he was not drawing on his career. He was drawing on something much older and more personal than that. He was connecting one human experience to another, using the only tool he had that was equal to the moment. This is also what the crowd outside represented. The thousands of people who gathered when word spread were not there because Elvis was a celebrity. They were there because of what he had done. The act itself had moved them. In a world where fame often creates distance between people, Elvis had done the opposite. He had closed the distance completely. He had gone to where the grief was and sat with it, sung through it, and honored it. That is not something that can be manufactured or planned for publicity purposes. It either comes from a genuine place or it does not happen at all. And in this case, it came from a genuine place. The little girl grew up carrying this memory. Her father had loved Elvis, and Elvis had come to say goodbye to him. Whatever else life brought her after that day, she had the knowledge that her letter had been read, her request had been taken seriously, and the man she had written to had shown up exactly when she needed him to. That is the part of Elvis Presley that his music alone cannot fully capture. The records and the performances tell one story. Moments like this one tell another. And when you put both stories together, you begin to understand why, decades after his death, people still feel connected to him in a way that goes far beyond admiration for a singer. He made people feel like they mattered. And sometimes, when it counted most, he proved it.